So Marbury versus Madison, it is a great case and everybody's heard of it, but nobody really remembers what it was about. Well, you're going to learn all about it in today's episode. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. Today we are continuing in our epic Supreme Court case series, and we're going to look at Marbury versus Madison from way back in 1803. That case established and highlighted the Supreme Court's power of judicial review. Now, that sounds really boring, I know. When we get into the parties and the facts, it reads like a soap opera. It's crazy. So we're going to look at the parties, the facts, we're going to look at the Supreme Court's decision, its reasoning, and then we're going to look at why this case is epic. If you enjoy the episode, I'd ask you to hit that like button. If you got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. If you'd like to learn more about epic Supreme Court cases or legal topics in general, then I would invite you to subscribe to the channel. And as always, I love it when you share me on social media. So let's talk about Marbury versus Madison. Way back. The case was decided in 1803, but we got to go back even further when we're talking about setting up the facts behind this case. Now, the parties were William Marbury. He was a judicial appointee of President John Adams. He was the second president of the United States. And the defendant was James Madison. He was the Secretary of State under Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president. And that'll all become more important here in a minute. So let's set the scene. We've got, everybody knows George Washington. He was the first president, right? He was a president for 2 terms, 8 years, and John Adams was his vice president during that time, the first presidency. So George Washington retires. He doesn't run again. And the election of 1796, John Adams, who is a Federalist, he narrowly wins over Thomas Jefferson, who is an anti-Federalist. So these guys, like Republicans and Democrats, they didn't call it that back then, but they were on different sides of the political spectrum. So John Adams serves 1 term as the president and then is defeated in the next election, which was in 1800 by Thomas Jefferson. He beat him in that particular election. So at the end of President John Adams' term, the Federalist-dominated legislature took several actions at the last minute, including passing what is now known as the Midnight Judges Act. And what that did was created a bunch of new judgeships all across the United States. And President Adams spent his last days in office feverishly appointing Federalist judges to fill these newly established positions. So these new judges were approved by Congress 2 days before Adams left office. He signed off on the appointments 1 day before he left office. And the last remaining step was for the Secretary of State, who was John Marshall at the time. He had to physically deliver these appointments to the judges for them to take effect. However, this was the last day of Adams' presidency, and there just wasn't time to deliver all of these appointments to all of the judges prior to Thomas Jefferson taking office the very next day. Now, that's the facts of the case. However, there's an interesting tidbit in there. So John Marshall, as we talked about, he was the Secretary of State, right? He had previously been appointed as a Supreme Court justice. So on Thomas Jefferson's first day in office, John Marshall is no longer Secretary of State, right? His role had ended under President Adams' presidency. And at that point in time, he was a Supreme Court justice, which changed in 1 day. He's actually the Supreme Court justice that swore Thomas Jefferson into office that next day. All the while, when he's doing this, these undelivered appointments are sitting on what was his desk back in the Secretary of State's office, if you can follow all that. But the new Secretary of State was James Madison. He had been appointed by Thomas Jefferson. So what does Jefferson do with all of these undelivered appointments? Well, he tells Madison, don't deliver them. Don't do it. He said, hey, they're Federalists. We're anti-Federalists. So just simply don't deliver them. Now, one of these undelivered appointments to be a judge was to William Marbury. Then Marbury says, hey, I was duly appointed by the then acting president. The job is mine. And so he sues James Madison, who is the then acting Secretary of State, to compel him to deliver the appointment to him so he can be a judge. Thus, we have Marbury versus Madison. So the case is filed. The Supreme Court hears the case and in a unanimous decision denies Marbury's request. And interestingly, the court actually agreed that Marbury was probably legally entitled to the appointment. However, it held that it would be an unconstitutional expansion of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for it to actually order delivery of that appointment. And who wrote the opinion? Well, John Marshall, of course, the guy that actually didn't deliver the appointments under John Adams. And there was a famous quote that was taken from this case that's actually etched into the Supreme Court building in D.C. that says, it is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. It is a simple phrase, but the significance of this case is that it really emphasized the court's power of judicial review. And that is to make sure that all laws and legislative acts are up to constitutional muster. And that all sounds boring, but essentially it is the Supreme Court saying that we are the ultimate decision makers when it comes to matters of the Constitution. We are the kings. And that's a big deal because, as we know, the legislative branch, they make the laws. The executive branch, they enforce the laws. And the judicial branch interprets the laws. But in this case, the Supreme Court is saying, essentially, to Congress, you may make the laws, but if they are unconstitutional, we have the right to strike it down. And they're saying to the executive branch, you may enforce the laws, but if you do it in a way that violates the Constitution, we can invalidate your acts. And if we're looking for some examples of this, these are some of the other cases that are other epic cases that were made possible because of the power of judicial review. If you think about Roe versus Wade, that was our United States Supreme Court telling states who had declared that first trimester abortions were illegal, telling states that those laws were unconstitutional. Brown versus the school board, separate but equal. The U.S. Supreme Court was telling states that passed laws saying you can have separate facilities for education that you can't. Separate is never equal. And when you flip it to the executive branch, and we're talking about that, we have a couple of cases. Weeks versus the United States, that's an epic Supreme Court case on this channel. And Miranda versus Arizona is as well, where the Supreme Court was telling law enforcement, hey, you need a search warrant if you're going to search somebody's home, or you have to tell a defendant of their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So ultimately, this case, Marbury versus Madison, is epic because the Supreme Court declares itself all-powerful, right? We are the kings when it comes to the Constitution. And it's ironic that in the case where they declare themselves all-powerful, the actual case itself, the instruction they give to Marbury is that, hey, we can't do what you're asking because we don't have the authority to do it. So the government in one breath is saying we are all powerful, and in another is saying, but we can't do that. And that's government for you, isn't it? So that's the episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. If you want to learn more about legal topics, epic Supreme Court cases, then I would invite you to subscribe to the channel. And as always, I love it when you share me on social media. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.